Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
Our report details how advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a selling machine.
Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Kinescope, our look at the era of live television. John Suntress here, Gabriel Hardman, Jeff Parker, Ian Brill, and interesting show today. One of the earlier sitcoms around the I Love Lucy era. It started a year after I Love Lucy, 1952. Mr. Peepers, as it says, by David Swift, starring this man, the great Wally Cox. I guess nerds of the day now would know him best as the voice of Underdog, of course.
Well, nerds from 1960, yeah. But sure, I don't. It does any. If I hope that kids know who Underdog is, because that's super important. But yeah, this is an interesting show. I was a little dreading this one because I don't know. It doesn't sound like it could be good, but like I don't know. It actually was a pretty interesting show, particularly the later episode that we watched.
Agreed. We watched the first episode, which is very different from what the show became as far as other cast members and characters. Here's the classic lineup here. There's Wally Cox on the left. Tony Randall in the middle there on the top. I forget his leading lady's name. I'll get it in a second. And then, of course, the great Marion Lauren. We'll talk about her later as well. But that was really the nucleus of the show. Mr. Peepers, a grade school science teacher and very much a milquetoast. Yes, like this. Hello. It's a little more droopy than I think Wally Cox as far as my imitation goes. But yeah,
but it's a lot about, that delivery is a lot about, it's a lot about the way he delivers that stuff. It's not that, and his kind of, like it's not just that he's this, this nerdy character. There's this kind of sly delivery that makes jokes play.
Well, the whole first show is just, here's the pilot of Mr. Peepers. Here comes this guy. His name is Mr. Peepers. He wears glasses. And he's here.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah,
there's nothing going on. They barely wrote it, and it's just depending on the brute charm of Wally Cox. They've got nothing. They're even resorting to toupee gags, like it's which is played out by this point by the Three Stooges years ago.
Yeah, but the live audience is screaming at said toupee.
Oh yeah, who doesn't love a toupee gag? There might be a Murphy bed joke coming up, John.
Sure, exactly.
Where someone gets in a Murphy bed and folds up into the wall.
Well, and I mean, it plays out more in the other episode we're going to talk about. But this show is so of its moment. This is 1952.
No, when you jump to episode 41, then suddenly you're watching something completely different. And this is the kind of thing that TV can't do anymore. You can't have a show figure out what it is. Right. Now they'll cancel your ass halfway through the first season.
But again, screams at that pilot. So and really real fast and let's Gabe, are you ready to do a background on Wally Cox? I am, if not.
I mean, yeah, we can talk about him absolutely.
Let Ian talk about Marlon Brando.
Of course.
Well, okay. Yes, we have to get into it through the Marlon Brando. Yeah. Good idea.
I don't know the whole. I mean, I know about Marlon Brando, the guy,
they were so Wally Cox and Marlon Brando. I'm not sure why we're leading with Marlon Brando, but Wally Cox and Marlon Brando were like they were friends when they were like 9 years old. They met in Evanston, Illinois, when they both moved there. They a certain amount of this I'm getting from an article written by this writer Jim Kinnefold that I sort of know, and but he. They briefly knew each other's kids. They they hung out together, and then later, like after World War II, and they both lived in New York. Wally Cox was going to NYU studying metallurgy and jewelry design, and Brando was studying with Stella Adler. They ended up being roommates, and Wally Cox sort of like developed this sort of fledgling stand-up career. He started at like the Village Vanguard, the jazz club in the West Village, and and Brando kind of pushed him to go study with Stella Adler and his teacher, and so he ended up being on the Arthur Godfrey show, doing this stand-up routine where like he came in second, but then he was but then that kind of was his entree to getting work and basically he got the Mr. Peepers gig off of this. And, and that kind of cemented his character, not for the good, as far as Wally Cox was concerned, for the rest of his career. Like he felt extraordinarily typecast by it.
And a very reluctant showbiz person. Like you said, he went to New York to become a silversmith. And literally, like, not even a fine silversmith, literally one of those 8th Avenue guys, vendors that, here's a couple cufflinks, here's a tie clip, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and trying to take care of his, his sister and mother or something, But
was a great storyteller amongst Brando and their mutual friends. And it's like, hey, man, you got a knack for this. I mean, it is so great that it's so just, hey, get up on stage and do what you do at the parties. Yeah. And the man suddenly became a reluctant overnight success.
Right. So there's a lot of talk about what the relationship was really like between Brando and Wally Cox, and we just don't know. But Brando did have a pet raccoon named Russell. And apparently this raccoon in a New York City apartment, a tiny New York City apartment shared with Wally Cox, not pretty smelly, right? Not housebroken. So at a certain point, it was kind of the raccoon or Wally Cox, and Wally Cox decided to go. But they stayed great friends for the rest of their lives. And even when he was when Wally Cox died pretty young, like he died in the early 70s. He did, one of his next to last role is in the second Kolchak movie, Kolchak with Night Strike.
That's right.
And he doesn't look like he's doing great in that. He looks like he's a little overweight, and he looks like he's older than he is. And then he died of like a massive heart attack pretty early on.
Yeah, and had bit roles and guest starring roles after Mr. Peepers. Mr. Peepers only ran 3 years. But it really was a big national deal. And before we leave the pilot, because we like to always show pictures of awkward children. And here's the kid watching Mr. Peepers practice speaking to an imaginary class, just kind of going through the motions. And there's a little sight gag where he says, "Oh, Susie, why don't you race the billboard?" And the slack-jawed yokel over here is the guy who does it behind.
Yeah, it turns out that programming of the early 50s is a virtual treasure trove of ugly, slack-jawed children. You know,
where'd they find?
I wonder the television kept going, considering the amount of ugly children on it.
I know.
Like,
well,
look, it was a different aesthetic back then. They were more broad-minded than we are.
It's so frankly, cool, though, to see stuff like to constantly see actors when you're watching these who came from the real world and weren't just raised as child actors who became adult actors, which is everyone now.
Yeah.
Well, and we talk about it more off the air than on the air, but the great creator of Sergeant Bilko and Car 54, Where Are You? Nat Hiken was kind of known, especially like doing television in New York rather than LA, and like getting ugly, weird, normal people.
Right. And actually, in Car 54, Where Are You? I mean, brilliant show. And there's an episode that where Wally Cox is like the guest star, really, and he plays a pickpocket. The show is about a couple of cops, Tootie and Muldoon. Tootie is working the like undercover at the World Series, or something, I think.
The World Series, definitely.
Yeah, and he's trying to catch pickpockets. Wally Cox is a pickpocket who picks Tootie's badge, but turns out Wally Cox's character always desperately wanted to be a cop himself. So he then turns around and just goes around and pretends to be Officer Tootie and arrests every pickpocket at the game and becomes like a hero. While they think Tootie has become this brilliant cop, and in reality, it's just Wally Cox doing it. It's great. It's like that. The show Car 54 is great, but Wally Cox is particularly awesome in that one.
Well, and they gave him a chance to do something else, which is a cool thing for the show to have done.
Yeah.
Instead of everybody else plugging him in as do Mr. Peepers.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he's one of those characters who begets your Les Nessmans and such throughout TV history. Everybody's kind of, he's like Jackie Gleason in that way, that everybody's always sort of doing a swipe of him.
Yeah, no, totally.
So again, this is like the nuclear cast.
Tony Randall's hilarious.
Of the good. Yes. Yeah. And a very unlike Wally Cox, who really was typecast. Tony Randall is kind of the alpha male of the school, the gym teacher. I've got the cast list.
I thought he was a history teacher. I thought the gym teacher was a different guy. Am I wrong?
You're right. He was the history teacher. Excuse me.
Okay. But he's kind of the know-it-all guy, he's the guy who is, and this is where, I'm not an expert on Mr. Peepers. We watched these couple of episodes, but that later episode we watched, episode 41, I highly recommend watching that one because it's night and day from the other, and it's just particularly for me, I loved everything about the Tony Randall character, but also the fact that the episode centers around him. Tony Randall's character has, I'm not sure if it's on vacation or what, but he's taken home movies and he is convinced that he's a sort of auteur of home movies, even though this is the first time that he's ever done it. Right. And the way that simple setup plays out and everybody's interactions and all that stuff just works so well. And, the way he's talking about how, before he's shot this stuff, he hasn't actually seen anything that he's shot, but he's talking about how he approached he approached shooting it like it were Gone with the Wind, with a sort of mix of the style of Gone with the Wind and the sort of grandeur and compositions of Ben-Hur and then, of course they show, and he's half of it is the camera is on when he's not intending and it's just panning all over the place and, there's somebody's head's cut off and then there's a random guy smoking a cigarette that nobody knows for cut in the middle of it over and over again.
That was a great surreal bit.
Oh, good. So good. Yeah.
And with the payoff.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the premise itself is so greatly mid 20th century. going over to a friend's house to watch home movies, having to borrow the school's projector to be able to show the film and everything in house. I mean, again, being the oldest person in this group, I can tell you many a time in my early childhood when I was subjected to either family or neighbor home movies and stuff like that. Plus, everyone gets their little moment and stuff. Marion Lauren, who really perfected her kind of bumbling character on Bewitched, it first happened here. And again, great gag right there. Boom. She comes into the home movies and she's wearing 3D glasses. You know, I mean, it's great. Very cute.
She was able. So, you know, I watched some stuff on those Academy interviews, and Jack Klugman, who I don't think that we talk about enough how great a serious actor that Jack Klugman was.
Klugman for a while.
Never gets any credit on that. Never.
But there is a little interview with him where he talks about he just talks as a fan of Mr. Peepers, basically, where he, you know, and about her in particular and how she could just take any little moment and make it something, you know, in a way that like is really impressive. And I think she's better in this show, or at least in the ones I've watched, better in this show than in Bewitched, because it just is, to me, better. Not it's subjective, but like just the kind of thing I like a little bit better, where you're just playing in a very, you know, subtle little real world thing and little moments and stuff like that, more than big broad stuff.
Well, and she was obviously, you know, 10 or 15 years older when she was doing Bewitched, and this is more, you know, closer to probably when she's
younger, better written, more interesting stuff.
Sure,
in a lot of ways, you know.
Sure.
John, you'd probably appreciate this. This popped in my head, and I just remembered from reading a book about Andy Griffith years ago. Apparently, he and Don Knotts used to talk a lot about Mr. Peepers because Peepers would inform Barney's character a little bit, you know, just the quirky stuff, not necessarily the way he acted, but, you know, and they would always come back to the point of not getting Barney married or Andy, because the golden rule that they'd always bring up was that's what killed Mr. Peepers.
I was going to say, absolutely, man.
And that's like, that was apparently the TV law at that time. Like, no, it's like, which comics people have translated into Spider-Man getting married. Right. But
Patricia Benoit played the school teacher, the school nurse, Nancy Remington, who Peepers ultimately does, you know, will he, won't they, will they, won't they? And they did have a marriage episode, and it was just like every marriage sitcom episode you can imagine. Jeannie marrying Tony Nelson, everything, you know. God,
they're right though. It kills every show.
It kills every show.
Moonlighting,
and in that case, obviously consummating, but
everything.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Oh no, we've broken the sexual tension in our show.
Right. Although,
when that's your dynamic, and you take it away, and you don't have anything to fill it with, then you just start adding in random kids like the Cosby Show. Is just like, quick, shovel some more kids in here.
Right.
And that's when Robbie Risk showed up as Oliver.
Yes.
And,
but the one thing about it is that apparently that episode, the marriage episode, was like a phenomenon at the time.
That's what I'm saying.
Enormously popular. So that, and then, you know, but then obviously creatively they didn't have any place to go.
Yeah. And the status quo has been established and everyone can leave.
Yeah. Right. And but you know, to your point about Andy Griffith though, I think that it's also relevant that, you know, Mr. Peepers and Andy Griffith's show both kind of stuck to, let's make things small, let's make things about character moments, let's not let it all be about big, you know, kind of high concept-y stuff. It's about small stuff and about the way the characters interact.
Yeah. And ultimately feels bigger because of it. That's my favorite thing about that. Sort of going small always feels bigger. And vice versa.
It's just got more value to it. You know, you're like, it's relatable. It's like you're bringing something. I don't know. I do. It does speak to me a lot more. I mean, that's the difference between watching this and Bewitched, right? Like this is got a lot of small character observation comedy type stuff, and Bewitched is a big broad idea, and there are funny things in it, especially when I was a kid. But like it doesn't. But I don't think it's not like. There's something cool and subtle or something about Mr. Peepers in a way that I never expected,
it's not cringy like Bewitched.
That's
and
fair.
I mean that in cringe humor, which is what Bewitched is always doing.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, I'd watch that and I'm always kind of embarrassed because I don't like the fact that, I don't know, that they're being thought of as fools, or I don't know what it was. There was some little dynamic there that I hated as a kid.
Just because everybody's having something, they're being fooled. They're being, but it's not even like I mean, I guess it's a little bit like a farcical misunderstanding, but it's the premise of the show. So everybody always has to be kind of, a schmuck. Yeah.
Back to Peepers, it really was an accidental success because it replaced a film sitcom with as a minor character or a minor actor, the great Arnold Stang, and it was called Doc Corkle. They ran 3 episodes, and it had horrible ratings, and this was rushed in to fill in on the schedule, and it became a massive hit, and a live television show to replace a film television show.
Right. Wasn't Mr. Peepers, though, it had already kind of established itself. It was supposed to be like a summer show that had a limited run. Then that regular show came on, which was totally unsuccessful. And then they were like, holy shit, we got to get Mr. Peepers back. So like they,
you're right.
Peepers.
I
got to let a dog out. Be right back.
Okay. One thing is, so the guy who created the show, David Swift, he actually started at Disney. He was an assistant animator on, with the under Ward Kimball, one of the 9 Old Men. He worked on like all those early movies. Like, I mean, as an assistant, but like worked on Dumbo, Fantasia, Peter Pan, Pinocchio, Snow White, like that whole thing. Like he was part of that whole culture and came out of that. And ended up doing quite a bit of more than you think. Like then he was in World War II. He was a bomber pilot. He came back. He was, he wrote on radio for Bob Hope, for Jimmy Durante and Red Skelton, and then like he wrote a couple of like the anthology live TV shows we talk about. Philco Playhouse, Studio One, and then like after Mr. Peepers ended up going on to write and direct those Haley Mills movies, the Pollyanna and the Parent Trap. Yeah.
Yep. And he Disney, both pre and post TV Disney careers, his trajectory as a writer producer was very similar to Sheldon Leonard, because Sheldon Leonard had the same thing where he started as the bit player in the gangster roles that he had in black and white movies, and then pardon me, in the 40s and 50s, started writing radio and TV shows, and then ultimately, started producing and became the mogul that he was later in the 60s and on.
I always magically appear if Sheldon Leonard is invoked. What?
Was it normal? So one thing I noticed is when the title of the show comes on, it says Mr. Peepers by David Swift. It says authorial credit. Was that normal for shows of this time? Because you don't see that a lot.
Not up front like that.
Not necessarily that, but I mean, like as we've kind of talked about with other stuff, I mean, writers in TV were kind of elevated at that point, and I mean, I guess that just is a more but yeah, I don't know why exactly I didn't see anything about why he got that kind of credit right in the
W. Gillis treatment, where he's wanting to make sure
Max Schulman,
Schulman, you're like, and everybody ought to do it. Yeah, that's why they guys got work.
I mean, I guess they probably had good lawyers.
Back to Hyken. Hyken
did,
I mean, Hyken had a title card at the opening of both Bilko and Car 54. So yeah, I think you're right, Gabe. I think it was just that tradition of writers really being kind of the stars of early television. And also, like Yul Brynner, I love the idea that David Swift is really just able to walk in and pitch TV shows. And again, this is so early in TV that, I don't know what. I'm sure they had a lot of other people pitching shows. Clearly, Doc Corkle,
Right.
didn't make it. But I do find it interesting.
I mean, in the way we think about it now, how the fuck do you go in and pitch Mr. Peepers? Like what is that? Like, it's just, there's a junior high school science teacher.
But it's Wally. I mean, and again, like we said, Wally was already. It was a vehicle for Wally's shtick.
It's hard to think now, but even up until the 90s, it would just be, if someone was a popular stand-up, you just made a show about their persona. And I guess it doesn't happen as much now, I guess, because the sitcom's in a weird place. But that was Roseanne and Home Improvement.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and then it gets the lower in quality level because they have to use their real first name all the time.
Yes, like, Seinfeld used his first and last name.
Sad but true. So I don't know. David Swift, maybe the Chandra Rhimes of his era, perhaps.
The Dick Wolf.
The Dick Wolf. I like that. Sure, why not?
Charlie Kaufman.
So what else do we have to say about Mr. Peepers? Well, it was good. I mean, it was an interesting show. I mean, it was like I didn't dislike it, but and I like that kind of almost meta quality, or that aware quality to the later episode that we watched. That's kind of, it's expecting a little more of you than you would think for a show like this.
Yeah. They leapt forward from the toupee joke. There's no question about that. And also Wally Cox, another thing that he was known for, a regular on Hollywood Squares. And I will say that I'm old enough to remember watching Wally in the early 70s, still being one of the squares there.
Yeah, supposedly he would just ignore the pre-written stuff and go with things of his own. Apparently he was kind of a, like he's the nerdy slight guy, but he was supposed to be like kind of an athletic guy, and he, and sort of an acerbic, cynical guy in real life, and really hated the idea of that kind of Mr. Peepers character and him always having to play that sort of thing. And he just very rarely got roles just because of his voice and his look and everything. I mean, he rarely got cast out of type.
Well, sure. I'm going to rule the world. Yeah, sure you are. All right. Yeah, no problem.
I don't know. I mean, that sounds like a pretty lousy role though, John. Like, I mean, what is he like? That's just like, he's sadly on some like kids show about, some Flash Gordon kid show.
Well, did he like? Does anyone know? Like, did he like doing Underdog?
That I could never find. I mean, he was.
I don't know. I did. Yeah, I didn't.
Underdog is a superhero. He has, he's powerful.
Speed of lightning, roar of thunder.
Yeah, roar of thunder. Yeah.
Come on.
Although, hey, look, I tried to watch some Underdog on Tubi, and I don't know what the fuck's going on, but they changed the song at the beginning of it. And
did they? They couldn't get the right.
Me off. Yeah, I don't know how do you not get the Underdog song, but you get Underdog? I don't know what happened. Maybe it was some repackaged version for a syndicated thing from some later time where they felt like they had to update it or something. I don't know, but it made me angry, and I don't get angry about this sort of stuff that much.
What you should do is the next time you watch Underdog, just when the song comes on or the fake song comes on, just put it on mute and play the Butthole Surfers version of that song.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. It's like, that was a pretty good version.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Yeah.
I'm a big Underdog fan. All of the villains, from Simon Bar Sinister to the Wolf, Riff Raff. I'm going to take care of Underdog.
Right. Speaking of Sheldon Leonard, the Sheldon Leonard-y sort of thing. Yeah.
We had a guy in college who had big blonde hair, and he looked like Simon Bar Sinister's flunky, Cad. And we used to call him Cad because he looked like Cad from Underdog. Yeah, Bosch, but what about Underdog? So those were, they look like Jay Ward cartoons, and there is some sort of tangential, maybe the same, animators. I don't know, but now I'm blanking on the name of the company because it's the Tennessee Tuxedo Animation Company.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't UA, was it? It wasn't.
No, it wasn't UA.
Okay.
UPA or whatever.
No, it wasn't UPA. No. Okay. They were syndicated. They man, you want to talk about inappropriate cartoons? Hey, sit down and watch Go Go Gophers for a while. The Gophers as Native Americans.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Right. Yeah, when they take over Alcatraz and and demand their rights. That's my favorite episode. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's too early to be to Patty Freeling, I think.
It's not to Patty. And right now I'm going to have to look it up, but yeah. And they were also Commander McBragg. There, the Deep South. Did I ever tell you about the time?
Well, yeah, it really does run up against Jay Ward cartoons, but like you say, it's not. What the hell was it? I should know this.
I feel like I should.
I don't even want to look it up because I feel like that's cheating.
64 to 67 was the years for Underdog. It is on Tubi. Pardon me.
Yes, in a sadly adulterated form.
Yes. Total Television.
Okay. What?
So that was the name of the company. Oh, absolutely. W. Watts Biggers teamed with Chet Stover, Treadwell Covington, and artist
Treadwell Covington.
Treadwell Covington. Wow. They were all part of.
That's a real name.
They were all part of the ad agency that represented General Mills, and they packaged the cartoons to sell General Mills cereal. Also, King Leonardo, Tennessee Tuxedo, as I said, Underdog, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's funny because W. Watts Biggers, I read he was also a novelist. I read one of his books called The Man Inside, and it's funny that you say like he was an ad man because that's a very 60s book that tries to be about like higher consciousness. I'm just imagining him as like
the Don Draper.
Well, I was going to say like Ken Cosgrove in Mad Men. Like he writes a sci-fi story and it gets printed in, I think, like the Atlantic or something like that. And like he's this guy who's like he's making Underdog, but he's like, really, I want to change the world. But he has a great name, W. Watts Biggers.
That's sadly relatable, by the way.
Yes,
you should check out The Man Inside. It's not a good book, but it's an interesting book.
Yeah,
I mean, look, the guy, Buck Biggers, Chester Chet Stover, and Treadwell D. Covington. For fuck's sake, like there's more entertainment value in those names than, or like you're already entertained just by the names of the guys from the company. Like, you know,
can we rush this up? I have a squash meet with Treadwell T. Cunningham.
I'm imagining when they came up with the name Simon Bar Sinister, where they're like, finally, a normal name for these characters.
Yeah, right.
Something a person would be called.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Well played. Very nice. Yeah, Mr. Peepers is on Tubi. We recommend
season, though.
Yeah, only the first season. Yeah, so you can't see that later stuff with the good stuff, you know. But
Tony Randall
look on YouTube because there have been DVD sets and a lot of tapeworms have thrown episodes up on YouTube as well.
Yeah, although the good one that we're talking about, episode 41, is one that was restored by UCLA. So there's a really nice version of it on there.
Yes. No, it was great. It was great to see that. But yeah, I mean, again, you got to appreciate that cast and the great things they went on to do. The school nurse, Nancy Benoit, Patricia Benoit. Nancy Remington is her character's name. She retired early in the early 60s from acting to raise her kids, and she actually lived into the 2000s and made it to her 90s. So it's kind of wild that I think she might have been the last surviving Peeper castmate. Ironically,
some of those kids might still be alive.
Actually, something terrible happened to every single one of them in the 60s.
They shot Mr. Peepers in the same irrigated desert that they shot
the Misfits.
They just
I was thinking of
the Conqueror.
The Genghis Khan movie that he made with Susan Hayward, and everybody died sadly.
Yes, yeah.
This just sadly reminded me. Well, it's not sad, but I'm just reminded of Tony Randall when he was last appearing on David Letterman and had a baby. Like, what was that, the late 90s or something? And
I remember that. I remember him being on The View.
So now that kid's like 21 or something.
Geez. Yeah, right. Okay.
I keep finding these amazing Tony Randall interviews from New York about his theater company and also the pursuit of creating a national theater company for the United States in the same way that they exist in pretty much every Western European country and Asian countries and all over the world.
Right.
And the great sadness that there was no, such program.
Yeah,
and
he really. Yeah, I do remember him talking about that on Letterman and stuff, or whenever he would be, a guest on these shows.
This was on CUNY, the college public television station, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
but no, it was great, and truly, I mean, he owned a piece of The Odd Couple. He was an active producer. So whereas residuals ran out for the actors, and he actually even as a gift to Klugman, gave Klugman a piece of the show as well. And so really, I mean, any of his acting money that he made, he threw everything into his theater stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's very cool. And this was the breakout thing for Tony Randall. I mean, this was what got him noticed when he in his interview for the Academy, he talks. They ask him about did it feel like the show ended prematurely, or were you sad when it was over? And he was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I got I got a gig on Broadway out of this, and like he basically was moving on with his career already by the time this
and he did in '64 he did the Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe, which I based a character on in a book Gabe and I worked on. And by the way, I love that book. I love that movie, but I particularly love the book by Charles Finney, The Circus of Dr. Lowe.
Oh wow!
If you can ever find it. Like Finney didn't write much. He did this one amazing book, especially when you see how old it is when he wrote it, and then he later did some short stories that are collected. But most of the time, I think he worked in Arizona or somewhere for a newspaper. He just kind of did his little thing and didn't really pursue that much. But that's one of those kind of Harper Lee type people who come out of here and blow you away with their debut novel and then go do something at piss around for where. I mean, I'm sure he had a real life and all that.
Yeah, well, I mean, but you can't dismiss how gross it is to deal with the entertainment business, with the publishing business, with all that sort of stuff. So
I can't not say that they're smarter than me, and and because they probably are. But Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe, which ruins the premise of it right there in the title, by the way, but it's a George Powell movie and it's well worth seeing. It's got some really cool effects and some interesting scenes in it.
Well, we should, for today's audiences, qualify the fact that Tony Randall plays an Asian character in the thing, and also Six Other Faces as well.
Well, he also plays the god Pan, a satyr, and a Medusa.
Yes,
he plays a Morgan.
Yes.
So,
but also in between Mr. Peepers and Dr. Lowe, he, of course, had his Rock Hudson movies. He had the movie with Jane Mansfield, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter?
Right.
And several 2 and 2.5 star movies that are decent enough that he's, either in some cases the star, in some cases the best friend. But
there was some movie I saw, John, you might remember this. There was some movie he was in as I was a kid. I feel like it had something to do with a genie or something. There was magic involved, and there was a birthday cake with eyeballs in it. And it freaked me out really badly as a child. And I cannot get that image out of my head years later, but I don't know what the movie was.
The movie's called The Brass Bottle. And Burl Ives plays the genie in the movie.
Thank you.
There you go. Yeah.
Absolutely. Sadly, I know. And also, I got an even better one for you. It's called Hello Down There, and he is a
I remember that one. Yeah,
he's a marine biologist who has a house and his laboratory are underwater.
Yes, yeah, that's right. I do remember that one. Yeah,
and there's a teenage daughter dating Richard Dreyfuss, and Richard Dreyfuss lip syncs as a bad '60s kind of pop band and stuff. But also Charlotte Rae in Hello Down There, and says the title of the movie, Hello Down There, kind of thing.
Yeah, it was cool. Like their living room had the part where you could go into the water underneath the vessel and swim out.
Yes.
So I guess a little sub would come up in there. I thought that was really cool.
Oh my God. As a kid, 100%, man. That's a great movie for a kid.
I wonder where they where they shot that. What studio that was? Because I always think, and like I always like the, there were a limited number of tanks. There are a limited number of tanks in on stages, right? There's one at Fox. There was the Ginger Rogers one. There's one at Paramount. Like I always think about that. Like whenever there's a water thing on a set, I'm like, which stage did they shoot that on and where? Because you have to open up the tank part and everything.
It's Paramount. Obviously, Rico Browning was involved because how could he not be? Like literally everything with water. That guy had a lock on it.
Yeah.
Well, and again, this was when Cousteau was doing his television show on ABC, and I always loved that because Underwater was just as mysterious and fascinating as outer space was. I mean, the space program and Jacques Cousteau were kind of hand in hand. Right. And they were, as a young viewer.
Cousteau. God, Jim Backus and Roddy McDowall were in it.
I don't remember. I gotta check out this movie.
Yeah, and I mean, well, and this was even the case into like with your underwater stuff like that. At Epcot there was like, I think it was called Horizons or something like that. But there was a ride where you would like go through, and there were the people who lived underwater, and then the people who lived on a farm. They had a space shuttle and stuff like that. It was always my favorite. It was my favorite thing about Epcot because it was like, oh, it's a future world that also doesn't quite seem like it could. Like it kind of seems envisioned in
the future,
20 years before Epcot was even open. So.
You gotta do the voice like it's a 16mm movie. It's the future today.
Yes.
The Bell Telephone Company presents the human heart.
Monsanto.
The Monsanto House of the Future. Yes.
Okay.
So was Tony Randall one of the first people who was like a sitcom star who went into movies? Because that used to be a much
that's fair. Sure,
that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, although obviously Lucy and Desi made
they went to movies
trailer.
They were movies, TV. So but also Randall was a radio actor as well prior to Mr. Peepers, and is on one of my absolute favorite adventure series. It's called I Love a Mystery.
Oh yeah,
and he did a very cheeseball British accent on there. He was Reggie York, but it was three detectives that would travel the globe. There's a great story about going to the Dominican Republic and encountering a temple of vampires. That's really cool. There was honestly, it was a very gruesome adventure show that played hard on the horror edge as far as the inciting incidents, which of course that's why they're inciting. But
movie.
They did. They made a couple movies in the 40s.
Was Mantan Moreland in one of them?
No, Mantan Moreland was not in one of them. But they're a bit formulaic like that. But
they were running a lot of things together here.
They were a little more serious than like the Charlie Chan films that Mantan Moreland made, and those kind of spook comedies that were kind of popular back then. But they also did one in the 70s as a TV movie. And Carlton E. Morris, the writer, was just a brilliant adventure writer. But Randall, and there were two versions of the show, one in the mid-40s and one in from 49 to like 50 or 51, literally right before Mr. Peepers. But Randall always like kind of downplayed his radio acting, which is a shame because I thought he was very effective.
Yeah. So when you say Randall, are you talking about Tony Randall?
Yes.
Or Randall the raccoon that Marlon Brando had?
Yeah, no. Randall the raccoon, unfortunately, had a very short life after Tony left the apartment. Apparently, Marlon was very hard up for meat and had served a very surprising chili one night.
We didn't talk about when we did Person to Person, the Marlon Brando episode. Check that out, folks. He does some great conga drumming at the end.
Oh, I don't doubt it. Yeah. Okay. So I think he did this, right?
John Banks says, first seen Seven Faces of Dr. Lau on TNT's Monster Vision in the early 90s. I was 12 or 13 and loved it. Yeah, Turner, TCM still shows it because it's a very cool George Pal movie. Randall is incredibly good playing all these different roles. Barbara Eden in Seven Faces of Dr.
All George Pal movies are cool.
I'm with you.
I'll say that.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
So there you go. So Mr. Peepers, everybody.
Yeah,
Again, if you really want a good sample of it, that UCLA restored episode 41 is fun, inventive, and that's one episode will do you.
Yeah.
You'll get it after that. But again, if you want to see the first season, also available on Tubi.
But you know what? I haven't seen the whole thing. Maybe like their endless riches in Mr. Peepers. We'll get back to us and tell us. So next week we're gonna be doing Judgment at Nuremberg, because
the feel-good hit of the year.
Yeah, well, we're all I think we're all thinking about international war crimes and stuff right now. We're all thinking about who should be sent to The Hague, and I think this is probably an appropriate thing to. Yeah, I know. Yeah. I've been thinking about it a lot. So let's I think it's not going to be upbeat. I'm not going to promise that, but it'll at least be interesting.
But a lot of the people that were in the film were also in the TV show. It's directed by George Roy Hill, who, of course, later in the 70s, from Butch Cassidy to The Sting. Yeah. I mean, and I'm really glad we're finally doing a George Roy Hill teleplay.
Yeah, because he's one of those directors. I mean, he doesn't get quite as much, play these days as some of those other 70s directors. But it's definitely an interesting, guy to look at, and I'm glad we're finally, we're getting around to talking about his TV work, because he is one of those guys who came out of live TV.
Totally, and Abby Mann, the man who wrote Judgment in Nuremberg, first as a teleplay, and then he adapted his own telescript for the movie that came out 2 years later. Really interesting, and also I'll mention it probably next week as well. Obviously, Judgment in Nuremberg deals with the German war crimes. There's a great Netflix show from the last 5 years that I believe was produced by both Tokyo Television and the Netherlands. There are a couple American actors. It's called Tokyo Trial, and it's all about the Japanese war crimes and how the tribunal and world court there dealt with those war crimes. Really interesting, and it's a mini series. It's not a movie. But obviously plays on a lot of the same themes, a lot of the questions of conscience that the tribunal had to deal with, because these were kind of, I think, the first time that a world court really addressed these kinds of heinous actions and everything. So,
and let's just hope that tradition continues, and we can we can see some motherfuckers in the brought to justice in the future.
Well, if not, we can enjoy the past and appreciate when justice really mattered still. So, all right.
So, unbelievably downbeat.
This whole thing that's here to distract us from the awfulness.
Sometimes you just got to confront it head on, and that will be next week on Kinescope.
Indeed.
On StreamYard.
Boys, thanks a lot as always. And for everyone at home listening and watching, thank you. Feel free to readjust your rabbit ears.
Our report details how advertising through television transforms strangers to your product into acquaintances, and acquaintances into friends, and friends into customers. You could almost say, as a result, that television puts into every living room a selling